Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in on the last week of our road trip series. And these past few weeks, we've been talking about road trips and how life sometimes is like a road trip. It doesn't always go as planned, and road trips really do go as planned. Considering that we may be in the car longer than we originally thought, the most important part of road trips might not even be where you're going or how you're getting there. Maybe the key to a good journey is who you're going with, and that's exactly what we're talking about this Sunday night. See, the fact is, the people you take with you have the power to influence the quality of your road trip. And if you think about it, that same truth can be applied in almost every part of your life. See, people make your life better, not just any people, but your people. And I'm willing to bet that all those people have something in common. No matter who your closest friends are, there's a good chance that they're a lot like you, because most of us choose to surround ourselves with people who are a lot like us. And that's normal. We tend to like people who are like us. Now, we don't wake up every day and say, I want to find friends that are a lot like me. It's just something we drift towards. In that same way, just as we drift towards people who are like us, we also have a tendency to drift away from people who aren't like us. Now, maybe that sounds harsh, but it's not that we hate people who are different from us. It's just that we have a tendency to move towards people that are like us. So the people who are on your life's journey with you are probably very similar to you. Most of us probably don't even realize it, but there are groups of people who are different from us, that we've probably made some assumptions about, because the who matters. See, it's completely natural and we all do it, but at the same time, something in us knows that this attitude towards all people might not be okay, that we make assumptions. But here's the problem. You can't just start liking someone that you don't like. You can't just become more comfortable with a group of people that you've been uncomfortable around for as long as you can remember. So what do we do with people who are different than us that we encounter on our road trips? To answer that question, we're going to look back at the very same road trip that Paul was traveling on when he met Jesus for the first time, the road to Damascus. See, the Bible tells us that there were men with Paul on the first road trip to Damascus, but the Bible doesn't tell us these men's names, and we're not told very much about them, but it's fair to assume that they were a lot like Paul. And before Paul had met Jesus, they were Jewish men on a mission to destroy the followers of Jesus. But we don't really know anything. We don't know their names. But then Paul meets Jesus and everything changes. He begins traveling with a completely different group of people. And our scripture adds on to the road trip story, and it says this as we're looking at the journey that Paul's on. It says, because some of the Jews now had started to plot against Paul, just as he was about to set sail for Syria, Paul decided to go back through Macedonia. He was accompanied by Sopater, son of Phereus, Astrachus and Sundices, and Gaiasus from Derbe. Timothy was also, and Tychicus and Timotheus from the province of Asia. Now, I don't know about you, but when I look at all those names, I think, holy cow, I can't even say them, and I probably messed them all up. But they weren't just people that were just part of the story. These were people who mattered enough to be included in Paul's story. Their names are in the story. And just the fact that their names are there tells us that it changed a lot about Paul's life. See, Paul's new crew here resembles a lot of like the United Nations, and I could barely say any of them, but 3 of the guys were from northern Greece, 2 were from near Galatia, 2 more were from near a city called Ephesus. Each friend that Paul has on this new journey after he meets Jesus is talked about in Scripture, and they bring their own specific background, culture, and view to the whole group. Why the big change? Because when Paul met Jesus, when he began to understand who Jesus was and how Jesus loved humanity, it changed the way Paul saw himself and the people around him. When it came to Paul's relationships, differences on the surface mattered less than what was the same below the surface. And the same is true for you and me. As you get to know Jesus, it will change the way you see people, all people around you. And see, all of this stuff sounds like a great concept until you're face to face with a real person who might be different than you. A real person who dresses differently, thinks differently, lives differently than you do. Then what? Now, thankfully, Paul didn't stop there. He continued on this theme by telling his readers exactly what life with no labels looks like. He goes on to say this in Scripture. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved. And now before Paul says anything about how we treat others, he points out that we are loved. All of us are loved. He then says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And when we treat other people this way, we're treating them just as Paul says we are, and we are treating them as dearly loved. In other words, treat everyone like they're someone. What would it look like for you to treat everyone like they're someone? This won't always feel fair. On your life's road trip, people may hurt you, look down on you, or treat you differently for any number of unfair reasons. And even if you treat them with compassion, it doesn't mean you'll always get treated that way in return. But even though we can't dictate how someone else treats us, we can decide how we'll treat them. That's the power that each and every one of us have. So you will have a natural pull to like the people who are like you and dislike people who aren't like you, but you aren't required to do what comes naturally. That's the beauty of the road trip of following Jesus. Imagine for a second if we all did this. How would you feel if people different than you began treating you with more patience, humility, and kindness? How do you think it would change the way you see them? How do you think the way you treat people and the people who are on your road trip, how do you think this would change the way that they see God and the way that you see God? Because when you're on the road trip with Jesus, you're going to encounter lots of different people. And the people that you're on this road trip with, on life's journey with, matter. So treat everyone that you come in contact with like they're someone. So we'll see you this Sunday, 4:45, for our small group leader meeting. And hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll see you Sunday. Bye, guys.